wanted to share with you my build guide for Musket Rapier. I've been playing that build for over 2000 hours, mostly doing PvP. The most important perk on your gear is Resilience. You need 5 Resilience perks on your gear, simply because the main threat to musket users are bow users and muskets, so basically ranged DPS. And because Vicious is a very meta perk on bows, that brings them over the 1.3 critical damage multiplier, and that means we need 5 resilient to well, diminish their damage as much as possible. The second perk that I would choose on every piece of gear, or at least try to, would be either Freedom or Elemental Aversion. So Freedom is better if you like to fight in close quarter. So arenas, or just if you have a certain playstyle where you like to close the distance on opponents and chase down people, I would choose Freedom in that case. But if you're more of a, well, only range DPS, so mostly for wars and OPRs, then I would instead choose something more like this hat, which has Elemental Aversion, Refreshing Evasion, and Resilient. Um, Elemental Aversion is just really good because you don't need to dodge, like Shirking Fortification, for example, for the damage reduction. And a lot of people in PvP right now are converting damage from full cross damage, for example, on the muskets and bows, and they have more elemental damage. And that's why we use elemental aversion if possible on gear, and also you want to have gemstone dust to balance your defenses, because as you can see, the gemstone that we choose on every single piece of our gear, again, because bows and muskets are the main source of damage to us and they do thrust damage, so we want to have as many emeralds as possible in our gear, which gives us thrust resistance. Actually, you want some weapon perks. The two perks I think are mandatory right now for muskets are empowering shooter stance. It just gives us a lot of damage, and crippling powder burn is excellent because a slowed target is a target that is easier to shoot. It's that simple. Shirking energy is just so good for light armor. Every 6 seconds, you get 15 stamina if you avoid a hit. And so basically that's more than 2 stamina per second if you use it effectively. And that's simply too good to pass on. And so I believe shirking energy is still a must-have on the pens. So you really have two options with rune glass gems. The one you see on my gear, I use sighted gems with 1% damage. And I also used emeralds because, as I explained before, I go heavy on the thrust protection, and I compensate and try to balance my resistances and my defenses by using a gemstone dust. For the amulet, I would always choose health and trust protection. Trust protection because, well, bows and muskets are the main threat to us again. And stamina recovery is a good third perk. I really like it because whenever I play arenas or I'm close to people with my rapier, then stamina recovery almost acts as a second life where I'm able to dodge 2 more times. Well, even a third time if you want to use all your stamina bar, and um, that allows you to, well, most of the time use your potions and basically reset the fight. For your ring, you want Mortal Empowerment. It's best in slot for wars and OPRs. And also, once you get to 15 stacks, you should adapt your playstyle and play a bit more defensively, because those stacks are very... Where I would change Mortal Empowerment for a different perk is when I'm in arenas, where I would use Invigorated Punishment instead. The second best perk is Keen Awareness. Keen awareness is really good because we don't use keen on our weapons, and so it gives us a source of critical chance, and also our weapons, they have high critical damage multiplier, um, and because of that, it's valuable to have a crit chance on our ring. The third perk is personal preference. I like Hearty, even on light armor. Then on the earring, refreshing toast is a must-have. The other perks are personal preference. Purifying toast has a lot of value in my opinion because of the musket powder burn, which you can remove by simply using a regeneration potion. And then refreshing evasion is better than refreshing if you use your musket most of the time. But if you use musket bow in a war, for example, then I would go for refreshing and not refreshing evasion. The musket, you want an attunement plus kingly jagged plus enchanted. If you cannot afford such a musket, you want to remove kingly jagged and instead go for attunement plus enchanted. And if you can afford it, you would add a third perk like keen, vicious, or a weapon perk. For the rapier, you want attunement, omnidirectional evade, and enchanted. That's the absolute best in slot. But if you only use your rapier as an escape tool, you might want King Speed, Keen, Omnidirectional Evade, or something like that instead. I just think the Rapier is too valuable as a damage source to skip on and use it only as an escape tool. But of course, Enchanted is hard to get, and so you could replace Enchanted by Vicious or Keen, which would make it way more affordable. For the heart runes, my preference is towards the stone form heart runes. You still have a choice to make. Mending form is really nice because of the heal it gives you. It allows you to basically pop that ultimate, if I can call it like that, and basically reset the fight and come back into the fight with full HP. The downside to Mending Form is, as you can read, you do 20% less damage. The consumables are quite simple. You want health potions, regen potions that you, if possible, keep to use the Purifying toast and remove a debuff. Hearty meals are nice when you're able to take cover and basically save one of your potions and instead just use a hearty meal and keep the potions for more dangerous situations. The gemstone dusts are really nice against everyone that converts damage to elemental damage, and mages, of course. Um, then, of course, you use your honing stones. Um, Oak flesh can be useful in arenas sometimes. And the most important one is your filet and mushroom sauce. Um, it allows us to get to 300 dexterity, above 150 intelligence, and actually 165 with that distribution, and still have 50 constitution. 50 constitution is not mandatory. You could drop to 5, but I wouldn't do it. I feel like if you're against a decent opponent, they will have an advantage over you, and you simply don't have enough HP to survive more than 2 hits from anyone. For secondaries, I believe you only have 3 real options. So that's musket with a rapier, which in my opinion is best overall for different types of contents. The second option would be hatchet. You would choose a hatchet if you really want to focus on keeping your mortal empowerment stacks on your ring active. And basically, the way you would play with the hatchet is you take damage, you pop berserk, and you just reset whenever you can with your potions and get back in the fight when you feel comfortable doing so. The third choice would be using a bow with your musket. I know some people do very well with a bow musket in duels, and it's also a very good combinations for wars, um, especially on defense, in my opinion, where you can play safer within the fort, for example, on the ramparts. For musket, I believe powder burn is a must-have. It's really good. It's a great source of damage. And with the weapon perk, you even have a slow on top of that. Then my second skill choice is shooter stance. I believe shooter stance is very valuable in wars mostly, or whenever you're able to have a significant distance between you and your opponents, because when you're uninterrupted, you're able to have a lot of damage and it's sustained damage. I know some people use stopping power instead of shooter stance, but the thing is, it's a lot of burst damage, but you don't have a lot of sustained damage. And against tanks, healers, and just people who know how to use potions, or even pre-pot with a regeneration potion and a gemstone dust, for example, then you might not be able to kill them, and then you basically don't have any damage until you get your cooldowns again. And so that's why shooter stance, in my opinion, is still the best second skill to choose. Then the third skill, really, you have a choice between sticky bomb and traps. Both have situations where they shine. Traps is really nice if you use riposte with your rapier. You can set up the trap and basically you can do free damage on the person for 3 seconds. And most of the time those are headshots. And so basically you're able to do, again, a lot of damage. I really like Sticky Bomb because there's a certain combo you can do, which you might have seen in my videos, where you throw the sticky bomb on someone running at you, then you use your riposte, and finally you finish the person, basically stacking the explosion of sticky bomb plus a heavy attack in the back with your rapier, and most of the time you're able to kill basically anyone from 100 to 0 with such a combo, and so that's why I like sticky bomb. For rapier, I would always choose evade and flesh. Those two skills are just so good because they can be used in both offensive and defensive manners. But then the third skill, some people use riposte and others prefer flourish and finish. Um, the argument for riposte is better because of the weapon perk, which gives you a rend, and unless you use trap on your musket, um, you don't have any sources of rend in your build, and rend can be very valuable, especially when you combine the rend with another source of damage, such as the sticky bomb combo. And so that's why I prefer riposte personally, but I can also understand why some people really like flourish and finish. It's like you can read a stagger and a pushback. So here's a few tips and tricks. A very basic one is to reload your powder burn, so that when you get in a fight, you basically have your second powder burn as fast as possible. Second one is to know your combos. You can look at my videos in arenas mostly, where I simply use a sticky bomb on an opponent that runs at me. It's very easy usually to throw at someone that runs at you because they most likely will take a straight path to you, and so they run at you in a straight line. And what you do is you throw a sticky bomb at them, and at the very last second, you want to pull out your rapier, do a riposte, and when they hit the riposte, hopefully, you dodge behind them, you use stamina, you charge a heavy attack, and you do an evade with an attack. Another tip I have for you is to use Sticky Bomb as a defensive tool, or a way to cover your escape. And so basically, if I'm getting chased from someone exiting the fort right there is following me. I'll throw it somewhere in front of me, roll, and basically by the time he gets there, it's gonna pop and it's going to do damage or even stagger right now, but soon there won't be any stagger after the PTR changes. If you choose to take the second weapon perk, skill perk after Sticky Bomb, you get an extra 40 stamina if the person decides to take the damage. So basically, not only do they take damage, but you get an extra roll afterwards. The third tip I have for you is to bait abilities or movement from your opponents. And one way you can do that with that build is using Flesh, but canceling Flesh with Evade instead. And basically what you have is someone like a Great Axe user trying to catch you in your flesh, and he thinks he's a step ahead by placing the grav well in front of you, and he thinks you're going to go straight into that grav well and basically be defenseless. But what happens if you cancel the flesh with your evade immediately after is the person is going to place the grav well in front of you, but you can still use your flesh to go the opposite direction or whatever you want. So it looks like that. And as you can see, I still have flesh, and I do it the opposite direction now. And so the person wasted his best catching tool for you, and you create a distance by doing that small little trick. Another tip I have for you, and that might be a very situational one, but still I wanted to share it, is that if you crouch and shoot right after, your shot will go straight in front where you're aiming, but you still have movement. Well, you're still crouching as fast as possible without losing any time. And it might be useful against some ranged opponents that are trying to headshot you. And so basically it looks like that. I crouch and then I shoot right after. And the shot, as you can see, goes straight ahead where I was aiming. And there's no delay in my action. So another thing to know when you play Musket Rapier or Musket Bow in a war, for example, is your priority targets. You should always prioritize healers and other dex players, especially if they have a high count of mortal empowerment stacks. Then they should really be your priority.